China is getting ready to invade Taiwan, and Japan, it's getting ready for war. As President Xi Jinping ramps up pressure across the Taiwan Strait, Japan is throwing out decades of pacifism and preparing to meet force with force. Not just statements, but with stealth fighters, next-gen missiles, and war drills that leave no doubt about its intention. This isn't posturing, this is preparation for battle. And the message to Beijing couldn't be clearer. If China moves on Taiwan, Japan is ready to fight. So how far is Japan really willing to go? What new technologies are they unleashing? And what does this mean for the most dangerous flashpoint in the world today? Let's break it down. Japan has spent the last few years deeply embroiling itself in the United States' F-35 program. As of March 2025, Japan had ordered an impressive 105 F-35As and 42 F-35Bs, making it the largest non-US participant in the F-35 program. Both variants could prove vital if Japan goes to war with China. The F-35A is a fifth-generation stealth fighter that combines agility, versatility, and extreme performance with an advanced sensor package that delivers more information to pilots than any other jet in history. Its specs highlight what makes it so impressive. The jet engines generate a staggering 43,000 pounds of thrust, enabling it to reach speeds of Mach 1.6 for distances up to 1,350 miles with a full stock of internal fuel. Add aerial tankers that allow the F-35A to refuel in mid-air into the mix, and you theoretically have a jet that can stay in the skies for as long as Japan needs it to. Japan's F-35As have a maximum ceiling of 50,000 feet and are versatile enough to carry a wide range of munitions, with Japan having the option to tweak the loadout based on its mission requirements. The F-35B is no slouch either. It matches many of the F-35A's specs, including its flight ceiling and speed, with its loadout typically comprising a pair of internal bombs and 2 air-to-air missiles. Granted, it has a slightly lower fuel capacity. That reduces the F-35B's range to 1,035 miles. However, it makes up for that with the ability to take off from very short distances and land practically vertically when it returns to base. Both are impressive fighter jets, and both serve as warnings to China. Japan has amassed aerial power that can take on anything the People's Liberation Army, or the PLA, can send into the skies. But if that was all that Japan was doing to bolster its aerial prowess, China wouldn't be too worried. The F-35s are powerful jets, but they're also known quantities. Far more worrying for China, along with being another sign that Japan is gearing up for a fight, is the Mitsubishi FX. Not a lot is known about this secretive stealth fighter. What we do know is that it's a 6th-generation fighter that's been in development by Japan's Air Self-Defense Force, or JADSF, for several years, and that it's planned to take its first flight in 2028. Japan also isn't working alone on its development. In December 2022, it announced that it would start working alongside the UK and Italy to make its new 6th-generation fighter a reality, making the Mitsubishi FX a product of 3 countries that know their way around engineering. We only have hints about the new jet's capabilities. It's a stealth fighter, with prototype images suggesting that it somewhat mimics the design of the F-22, only it's substantially larger. That greater size suggests that Japan is designing the jet to operate over longer ranges while carrying a heavier payload than its American cousin, both of which will be worrying to China. Japan is also working on reducing the jet's weight using innovative techniques, such as getting rid of fasteners in favor of using adhesive molding to directly bond composite materials. In terms of its loadout, Japan is developing a missile named the ASM-3 to serve as the jet's primary weapon. The Mitsubishi FX will also feature a special microwave weapon designed to disrupt incoming missiles that can be activated via the jet's AESA radar. Oh, and Japan is working on technology that will allow the jet's pilot to control a small fleet of unmanned aerial vehicles in flight. Those drones can act as sensor carriers, scouts for the pilot, or even fire munitions separately from the Mitsubishi FX. It's an impressive piece of kit, and it's another warning to China. If Xi invades Taiwan, Japan will be ready to take him on. Of course, amassing a larger fleet of modern fighter jets wouldn't mean much if Japan didn't have the missiles those jets needed to confront China's aircraft in the skies. Japan has that covered too. To complement its massive investments in US-made and domestic flight platforms, Japan has also been buying missiles. A lot of missiles. In January 2025, the US State Department announced its approval for the sale of 1,200 AIM-120D3 and AIM-120C8 advanced medium-range air-to-air missiles, or AMRAAMs, to Japan. The massive sale amounts to an investment of $3.64 billion, and Japan is making the purchase with a single intention in mind: ensuring its fighter jets have the power to take out Chinese aircraft. AIM-120 missiles are among the most advanced that the US has ever developed. They measure 143.9 inches in length and have a diameter of just 7 inches, making them sleek and maneuverable in the skies. The missiles travel at supersonic speeds and have ranges of over 20 miles. They use an active radar terminal as their guidance system, supported by inertial navigation that activates mid-course to ensure the missiles stay on track for their targets. When they hit, the AIM-120s unleash a blast fragmentation warhead that tears through any plane or incoming missile Japan might face. The versions of the missiles Japan has bought are upgraded and modernized, making them the best AIM-120s money can buy. And it's not just offense that's on Japan's mind. It's also buying missiles to defend itself against Chinese aerial assaults. A month after confirming its purchase of 1,200 US-made AMRAAMs, Japan also committed to spending $900 million on 150 Standard Missile 6 Block 1 weapons that can be deployed from Japanese warships carrying the Aegis weapon system. A notice published by Japan outlined the reason for the purchase, stating, "The proposed sale will further enhance Japan's capability to protect Japan and local allied land forces and will significantly improve Japan's contribution to integrated air missile defense in the Indo-Pacific region." Right now, Japan is capable of deploying the missile from 60 of its surface ships, making it a key part of the country's defensive plans against China. But so what, you might think? Sure, Japan is spending a lot of money on fighter jets and missiles. That doesn't indicate that it's gearing up to fight a war against China, it just means that Japan is strengthening its military. Perhaps. However, the notice Japan published when making its Standard Missile 6 purchase reveals something interesting. The country makes notice of using the missile to protect allied land forces and ensure it has an integrated air missile defense system. In other words, Japan is focusing on building itself up so it can cooperate with its allies if China makes any sort of move. And buying missiles isn't the only sign of Japan's increasing cooperation with its allies that China needs to worry about. There's also the biggest sign yet that Japan is gearing up for war. Japan is taking part in exercise Cope North 25. Writing for The Telegraph, renowned military correspondent David Axe says Japan is doing far more than observing or playing a minor role in the military exercise, which takes place in Guam. It's deploying troops and equipment, a lot of both. Japan plans to involve 250 of its pilots in the operation, along with 6 of its F-35 fighter jets, a Boeing KC-46 aerial tanker, and a pair of Northrop Grumman E-2 Hawkeye radar plane. As part of Cape North 25, those Japanese assets will link up with assets deployed by several of its allies, including the United States and Australia. Together, those countries will run a series of exercises to both test and align their 5th-generation aerial warfare capabilities. Royal Australian Air Force Contingent Commander Group Captain Darrell Porter explains why the exercise is so important. Bringing our F-35s and workforce together allows us to build on relationships and share practices, which will increase our interoperability with each other. Porter also points out that Australia has taken part in annual Cope North exercises since 2011. Japan has too, but Cope North 25 marks a major milestone. It's the first time that F-35 aircraft from Japan, Australia, and the United States have trained together. That kind of 5th-generation fighter integration sends a direct message to China. The JASDF isn't just preparing for war, it's preparing to fight alongside its closest allies. For years, Japan focused on pacifist defense. Now it's stepping into an active, offensive role, working shoulder to shoulder with major Indo-Pacific powers to defend its interests. So we have clear signs of intent from Japan. It's amassed an impressive fleet of aerial hardware that includes around 150 F-35s. It's also spending billions of dollars, both on the development of a 6th-generation fighter and the missiles its jets need to fight against Chinese forces. With its Cope North 25 involvement, Japan is also signaling that direct cooperation with its Indo-Pacific allies is on the agenda. And as Axe points out, more 3-way exercises involving Japanese, Australian, and American stealth fighters are planned for 2025 and 26 under the terms of a memorandum the 3 countries signed in May 2024. But still we're left with a question. What does any of this have to do with China? There are 2 answers. Beijing is gearing up to unleash some new warplanes of its own, and Japan is extremely concerned over Xi's plans for Taiwan. Starting with the Chinese warplanes, Axe says in his Telegraph article that the increased cooperation between Japan and its allies is now more urgent than it's ever been because the Chinese defense industry recently unveiled a pair of stealth warplane demonstrators. One is the Shenyang J-50, a tailless stealth fighter jet under development, and the other it's called the Chengdu J-36, and it's a bomber that Japan is rightly worried about. Both planes represent clear threats. The Shenyang J-35 is an interesting prospect. Not a lot is known about the fighter outside of it being carrier-borne. as China has revealed several prototypes since announcing the program created for its development. We do know that the currently proposed model is smaller than the Chengdu J-20 that entered service in the PLA back in 2017. The Shenyang J-35 is often compared to the F-35 due to its stealth features and multi-role capabilities. While it's not yet entered full service, it represents China's effort to develop their own version of the famous F-35. Therein lies the reason behind Japan's massive F-35 investment. It wants to have a fleet of aircraft ready to serve as a direct counter to China's upcoming stealth fighter to ensure Xi can't overpower Japan in carrier-based warfare. As for the Chengdu J-36, it's a slightly more worrying prospect for Japan. Axe describes the aircraft as a medium bomber that combines impressive range, payload, and stealth features to create a threat that is unprecedented and without an unclassified equal anywhere in the world. Naturally, China is keeping tight-lipped about the bomber's true capabilities. The diplomat can only provide some basic estimates about the aircraft, suggesting that it's around 74 feet long with a 79-foot wingspan. The few sightings of the J-36 that China has allowed suggest it has a blended fuselage, a pair of air intakes, and a massive central internal weapons bay that may be large enough to accommodate China's long-range PL-17 missile. A couple of smaller side weapons bays also appear to be present, suggesting the J-36 can pack a hefty amount of firepower. Exactly what that firepower could be remains to be seen. Either way, Japan is worried. China is bringing 2 new aircraft to an air force that already has an impressive number of fighters and attack types. That casts all of Japan's recent aerial moves in a new light. Japan is strengthening its quotient of fighters, buying missiles, and reinforcing its allegiances because it's watching China build new jets that represent clear threats, and it's worried. Not just about China's new jets, but about how it may plan to use them. That brings us to Taiwan and the moves Xi is making to claim the island. Axe lays out the real reason for Japan's massive aerial buildup in his article for The Telegraph. He says that if China invades Taiwan, Japan expects a hard fight in the airspace around the Japanese islands to ensue. Worse yet for Japan, the Chinese invasion of Taiwan may come sooner than it would like. Observers suggest that Xi has made 2027 the deadline for the invasion, which gives Japan 2 years to both decide if it wants to intervene and prepare for the aftermath such an intervention would create. Japan has plenty of reasons to want to get involved in the Taiwan issue. Back in 2021, Japan's leaders made a series of high-profile remarks suggesting that it would come to Taiwan's aid if China ever invaded. At the time, Brookings noted that these remarks were unusually blunt given Japan's pacifistic military doctrine, though they could also be easily misconstrued. Japan has never made a formal pledge to fight for Taiwan if China invades. However, it's not shy about reinforcing its opinions on China's claims to the island. Japan is ambiguous on its Taiwan policy. That ambiguity dates back to 1972 when Japan formally recognized the existence of China's Communist Party as the country's sole legal government. However, that recognition wasn't accompanied by Japan agreeing to China's claim to sovereignty over Taiwan. Officially, Japan takes no position on China's claims. Unofficially, that lack of a position is as close to Japan outright saying that China doesn't own Taiwan as you can get. And there's a good reason why Japan doesn't want China to control Taiwan. The Taiwan Strait. Every year, ships loaded with about $2.45 trillion worth of goods, which accounts for about a fifth of global maritime trade, sail through the Taiwan Strait. That alone would be reason enough for Japan to not want China to control Taiwan. With that control comes the ability to dictate what happens in the Taiwan Strait, giving China the leverage it needs to massively disrupt global trade. However, Japan also has self-serving interests when it comes to the Taiwan Strait. Of the $2.45 trillion in goods that sail through the waterway annually, Japan accounts for $444 billion. China Power reveals that this means around 32% of Japan's imports and 25% of its exports sail through the strait annually. Japan simply can't afford to allow China to control such a massive volume of its trade. If China invades Taiwan, Japan may feel compelled to come to the island's defense to protect its own economy, just as much as it wants to protect Taiwan. Japan is also far from the only Indo-Pacific nation that relies on the Taiwan Strait. Its ally Australia, with which it's going to work alongside in the Cope North 25 military exercises, sees around 27% of its exports pass through the strait. Another ally, South Korea, sends 23% of its exports and receives 30% of its imports via the Taiwan Strait. That means China's ambitions for Taiwan aren't just a Japanese problem, they're an Indo-Pacific problem. One that Japan intends to be fully ready to tackle if the estimates that China will invade Taiwan in 2027 prove to be correct. The question now is simple. Is Japan actually ready for a fight with China? The answer is simple. Not yet. Axe reveals this in his analysis. He points out that Japan's recent missile purchases, particularly of American AMRAAMs, are vital to its preparation. That's because its growing fleet of F-35s can't use the domestically made AAM-4 air-to-air missiles that Japan's Boeing F-15s and Mitsubishi F-2s use. Those missiles don't fit inside an F-35's internal weapons bay. If they can't be stored internally, they'd have to be held by external pylons, which diminish the stealth capabilities that make the F-35 such an important fighter jet. AIM-120s are a must. That's why Japan is buying plenty of them. But even with all the impressive moves Japan is making to improve its aerial forces, Japan doesn't quite stack up to China. It's outnumbered by a scale of 4-1 when it comes to fighter jets. China's existing fighters, such as the Chengdu J-20, may not be as impressive as Japan's F-35s and upcoming 6th-generation fighters. However, their sheer numbers, combined with the possibility of China entering new jets into the aerial battle in the coming years, means that Japan is at a massive disadvantage. That disadvantage extends to practically every area of warfare. Japan's active military of 247,150 is dwarfed by China's 2.035 million active personnel. China also has around 10 times the number of reserves that Japan has to bolster its forces. Japan currently spends around a fifth of what China does on its military, has less than half the number of aircraft, and comes up short when it comes to tanks and armored vehicle supplies. Even Japan's navy doesn't really compare to China's. The Japanese fleet of 159 vessels is much smaller than China's 754 asset-strong navy. Japan also lacks aircraft carriers, which is a concern given that it's investing heavily in carrier-borne aircraft. What do we see from all these figures? Cooperation is the key to Japanese success against China if Japan needs to respond to a Taiwan invasion. Again, that's where COPE North 25 and the future military exercises Japan plans to conduct with the US and its other allies come into play. Those exercises are designed to enhance cooperation, and in the event that China invades Taiwan, they'll also put Japan in a better position to call on its allies if it needs to go to war. So Japan has taken several massive steps toward war readiness. China is rightly stunned. However, more needs to be done over the next 2 years in Japan to ensure it's capable of fighting against China. Plus, a lot hinges on Japan's ability to convince its allies to come to its defense, along with Taiwan's, if Xi follows through on his plans for 2027. But what do you think about Japan's war preparations? Is it taking the right approach by focusing so intently on the aerial aspect of a potential war with China? What role do you think Japan's allies will play if war erupts in the Indo-Pacific? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more videos covering the latest developments in Japan, China, and Taiwan.